Hey, I apologize in advance. The neighbors are taking down some trees, so it's a bit noisy. But let me tell you what I've been up to. So I pickled all of my raw metal body panels. So those are all OSPHO acid etched. So I don't have to worry about them rusting while I'm working on it. I set up a snap line with just tying the shock tower braces with a piece of wood and a string, so I could get dead center and square. So I went to Harbor Freight, I bought a bunch of these squares and levels. You need stuff like that for this job. And then, you know, snap some center lines. So now I know that this floor panel section is perfectly sort of centered left and right and that way. The hardest part of this job is leveling on 3 axes. So you got this axis, this axis, and this axis. So it's pretty tough. You can see now my rocker panel sits reasonably level. So that was a big problem. I was doing a big downward dog. And this is all welded in. What I've done is I've welded it from the other side, which is nice because it's less cleanup. And since I'm doing it from scratch, I have that ability to weld it from the back side, which is really nice. That's still clecoed in. I'm having some issues with the outside dimensions here. This one looks okay. It goes in a little bit. That side over there is screwed up, so I got to cut that lip off of the floor pan and see how far I need to bring it in. So what am I learning? I'm learning a couple things. One is your garage floor is not level. So like I was measuring off of the bottom of the rocker panel to see if I was level, and that just made me feel terrible because it was like 1.5 inches off, but it was really not that far off. It was the garage floor mostly. God, the neighbors with their tree cutting. Goodness gracious. I've learned a lot about spot welding, welding metal. I've learned that weld through primer is not weld through. So what I do now is when I line it up, I'll take one of these little screwdrivers here and I'll scrape off in each hole manually so I see shiny metal, and that gives me much better contact, much better adhesion. You gotta get those panels clamped together close to get a good weld. Don't weld till you're ready and sure. I mocked this thing up like 3 or 4 times before I actually welded that floor pan section together, the seat support section. I ended up, also these new panels don't come with the seat belt. No, the seat mounts welded in. Only one of the 4 mounts was welded in on the driver's side and none of the passenger side. So I'd bought in the seat support brackets from Tom's. So I modified those and made my own for the ones I needed. And it's important to get those in because those actually sit between the sheet metal and the cross brace. So if you don't get them in before you weld that cross brace on, you're gonna be out of luck. And yeah, what else can I tell you? Oh, cold. It was so warm. It was like 85, so I got used to that. That was yesterday, not 80, 75. But now it's like 55 again, so I'm cold again. God. Hot, cold, hot, cold. Yeah, pulled the engine out again. And now I'm just gonna focus on the seats in the tunnel. Yeah. Once I get the seats in the tunnel, I think I'm gonna burn them in. Just double check what the old thing. Oh, the other thing, if you're building a tub from scratch like I am, from scratch, I'm not like digging the iron ore out and shaping it into steel, but you gotta remember to take these parking e-brake brackets off. There's 3 under your car. This is the furthest back, and then 2 other ones. Those are a pain to cut out of the tub from underneath. That's it, guys. So let me get to work. As I had mentioned previously, this tunnel brace, this brace that runs underneath the tunnel, it really never fit right. So there was like a half-inch gap here. So what I did was I cut it here, and I cut it here. I welded the tunnel I welded this section into the tunnel. Then I fit everything up with my seats, and that made everything really difficult because now you've lost that integrity. And so, you twist this and it needs to be tied together. But anyway, I finally got it fit up. I clecoed everything in. And then I made these out of 16 gauge. I just used a cardboard template and I shaped them there, and I basically plug welded them all over. Like, that's the last thing that's going to break on this car. So now the tunnel is basically welded together. Something I'm doing, I mentioned earlier, is wherever I can, I weld in from the bottom. So it just makes cleanup on the front so much easier. So this floor section's in. The other floor section I'm going to weld in traditionally. What I've done. Oh, one more thing. This is a very important piece. This brace is what the rocker comes here. Remember, we're upside down, and then the wing wall that the big hole is for the air conditioning, that also attaches right there. So this is a very important structural piece. So I got to get that fit. Here on the edge though, I might just cut this tab and cut this so that I can get this as far flush as possible. Otherwise, the rocker is going to be pushed in here, like to transition this lip, and I try to avoid that whenever I can. I try to cut and move the pieces in to make it as flush as possible. Now, over here, the floor, this rear floor section, the seat section, that's all welded up. And what I've done is I've gone and I've done my plug holes with the punch and flange tool. And over here, the tunnel just wasn't lining quite up, so I flanged this side so it steps in a little bit and went all the way around to those as well. So a lot of welding, a lot of fabbing today. I'm gonna now take this this front floor pan section, put it back in, test fit it, take all my measurements again. Again, I'm using my old body as a measuring stick, so I know, for example, the distance between this shelf and the break where the floor pan turns up. Same on the other side. I've got my snap line here, so I stay true to center. Just double check all that, and then I'm gonna weld it in. All right, floor's done. Let me show you what I did. All the seats are burned in all the way up around the flap there. The tunnel's in. My distances are good. It's 57 1/8 from there to there. Here I'm a little short, but I'll talk about that in my outro. But this side I burned in from the other side. You can see how clean that is. That's probably the right number of spot welds. This side I probably put too many spot welds, but that's okay. I definitely put too many spot welds. It's like, it should be three diameters apart, and these are probably only 1.5 or 2 diameters apart. So that's probably a little more appropriate distance wise. So that's all that's burned in. These are the seatbelt brackets, seatbelt bolts, nuts that I mounted up before. I'd accidentally cut away too much of this metal, so I grafted some in there. So yeah, next is the tunnel and then the firewall. I have two contradictory pieces of advice to give. One is you got to make sure everything's square. Like, for example, you can't go off the tires because the front track width is 2 inches wider than the rear. So if you look at the rocker panel in relation to where it lands on the tire, it looks crooked, but in fact it's square. So doing the snap line really helps. Finding some way to do a snap line is really important, so you have an objective measure. So levels and snap lines. Having said that, it's metal. So what I found is sometimes it just doesn't fit, but you can beat to fit and paint to match. So at one point I took a ratchet strap and I looped it around and tightened it all up and squeezed it together, and then I had to pull the tops apart because the tops were in too far. So I wouldn't say it's forgiving, but there's room. You know, metal stretches and metal compresses. So whether you need to pull those molecules apart or push them closer together, you can do it. Definitely advanced. I would say this is advanced car mechanics. It's not advanced mechanics, but it's definitely advanced car mechanics. So it took a while to be able to get comfortable enough welding to be able to do this, know what your machine's doing, see what the puddle's doing. The first time you weld, you're like, oh, zap, oh, zap, zap, ah. And then you burn through, or it's a big cold weld or whatever. But after a while, you get to sort of learn how to see the puddle, and there's no way to teach it. You just got to do it till you get it. So that's it. Floor pan's done. See you next time on Matt's Garage.